presentation. Most of them I have printed out on a handout. You don't need to have the handout in order for you to know what's going on, but if you're interested, take it afterwards. Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865, when enslaved African Americans in Texas were finally informed of their freedom, marking the effective end of slavery in the United States. On June 17th, 2021, President Joe Biden signed legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Pat Hults and I have been working on this project, and really I started about 10 years ago, at the time when I was the genealogist for the Historical Society. Two gentlemen from Schenectady came in looking for information on their Vedder and Roman families, two long-time Schoharie County names. The anomaly was that they were black, and we had no records on black families with these surnames. I was aware of Jack Daniels' work discovering the forgotten American history, thank you. Pat's going to jump in every once in a while. Keep me moving, because that's what she's really good at. And although, and I had started pulling bits and pieces of information, baptismal records that were for people who had no last names, people who were designated as black, colored, enslaved by, and although I did not know what direction I was going in when I started compiling records, I soon found myself with literally thousands of records. In 2021, the Schoharie County Historical Society, in conjunction with local libraries, did a lecture series, of which I did 2 lectures on. And after that, Kat came to me and said, "Can I put your stuff in a database?" Yay, yes. Anyway, these church records, eventually, Pat and I decided that this really needed to be turned into something other than just a list of names and dates. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was to connect to the people, the names, where they lived, what they did, and to really grab the courageous and long term. They were here for well over 100 years. Oops. Nice.
Is that one?
I've worked before. To be remembered in equal measure, and this is a quote from a documentary, 2023 documentary on the 761st Tank Battalion that was produced by Morgan Freeman and aired on PBS. And the quote wonderfully captures the need to gather what information we have about these courageous, enduring, creative, complex people who have been a vibrant part of our country since its beginning and whose story is largely untold. No? Somewhere I have to. Okay. Colonial records are notoriously hard to find. This is a copy of the 1790 census records, and this column says slaves. And if you look down here, this column is all burnt out. This is from the 1911 State Library fire. And basically, the information that we have about blacks in Schoharie County comes to us from Jeffrey Sims or Roscoe, and for the most part, they say they were lovely people. But that's about the size and shape of it. have to remember where I'm.
It's down, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look again, this is the, indexed portion, and these are all where the, burned parts are. Slaves, slaves, slaves. Let's see, I'll get it right eventually. So these are households listed with slaves in the 1790 census, and these are in the handout. These are the ones that were not destroyed by the fire. Total of 95 slaves that we can accurately pinpoint. And if you have a question, could you hold it to the end, or, because I got a lot to cover. So these are in the handouts. In the 1790 census, for, where am I pointing? Here we go. Schoharie in the town of Schoharie, Albany County, there are 5 free persons listed, presumed to be other than white, and they all live in white households. There are the only other free person household belongs to Cornelius. Him and his 3 people are the only ones that are in the town of Schoharie. And in comparing other records that I have found on Cornelius Thibault, we believe that this is indeed Cornelius Thibault. No? Wrong way. Who, interestingly enough, has a plaque in Harpersfield. I think it's on Wilcox Street. And Cornelius Thibault, who is a free black civilian, is captured along with, in William Harper's militia, was captured at Harpersfield by Joseph Grant's Tories band. This raid is now known as the Sugar Bush raid. There were 14 men captured in the Sugar Bush party. 3 were killed in the party. And I think the list is in the handout as well. Cornelius Thibault and these guys wound up being sent to Fort Niagara and then on to Montreal and spent the rest of the Revolutionary War in Canada as captives. And I think Cathy, Cornelius has a brick at the DAR.
I think so.
Thing, yeah. Not too much is known about this. Not too much is given this. I don't think that he ever had any pension or any recognition because he was a captive and because he was a black guy, and he came home and they said okie dokie.
And a civilian.
And a civilian. As far as we know, Cornelius Thibault remained in Canada as a prisoner of war throughout the Revolutionary War. And I did write an article that was published in the
review?
No? I don't think it was in the Review. I think it was in the Mountain Eagle and in the,
Okay, there was an article about that in the Eagle.
and the,
Or the
Times Journal, both of them, this winter, published them. Where am I going with this? In the 1800 federal census, this is a list of slave owners. There were 58 in total in the 1800 census. And I had a conversation this morning at the Colored Cemetery Memorial in Middleburg with a number of people, and they said, oh, well, there's, Adam Roman owned 10, he owned the most slaves. But, he had sons and brothers and cousins who also owned 9, 8, 7 slaves. So that if you needed a group of people to work on a farm, you had a labor force of 30 people, say, which was readily available to you. And I think somebody mentioned it's like borrowing your tractor. And we go in here. It's easy to forget that slavery was not abolished in the United States in one fell swoop, but in, can you tell me what number that slide says? 8, right?
That's slide 10.
10. It's 10?
Yeah,
I
10
think
of
I missed
20,
one.
okay, 10 of 35, now you're at
No.
9.
9?
You were at 10?
Alright. In 1799, New York State passed its first emancipation laws. Full emancipation would not happen in New York until 1827. And an inadvertent side effect of the 1799 law was to stimulate the sale of slaves so that the owners could recoup their lost investment. And at the time, the demand for slaves in the South was growing. And so, even though it was illegal to sell slaves in New York State at that time, it was very often done, and they went south to other places. Bills of sale for enslaved people are very rare in Schoharie County. This is one in which John Strubeck sells a black man slave named John Agert, aged 21 years old, for $255 lawful money, dated the 12th of February, 1817. As we see the date for emancipation come up, we see more and more dispersal of enslaved people, either through bills of sale. Mostly they are left to people in wills. This is John Ingold's will. He died in December 1809. The will was probated in January of 1810. And John Ingold seems to have a close relationship with the black community. He leaves his estate to his son John Jr., his daughter Margaret, wife of Peter Swart, and he mentions in his will his Negro woman slave, Peg. John Ingold, I believe, at one time owned the Rocks, which is Schaefer's farm, known as Schaefer's Farm now, which you would find here. What I find really interesting is here are 7 plots of land, small plots of land. And in many of the records that we find where we have black people attached to John Ingold, it states living near, living by, living with John Ingold. And I believe that these 7 plots are probably where those enslaved people lived. Like I said, this is 1809, that's his, 1809, his will was probated in 1810. Right down here is Sunnyside. On the other side of the Schoharie Creek, used to be called Sodom many years ago, for those of you who remember that. But there, there is also, I have found a large, and I can't remember the date of the census records for them, but there were as many as 109 black families or black individuals that lived down there on Sunnyside Road. Okay. Free gift patching. When you look at your, who was taken in the Sugar Bush raid, Free Gift Patchen was one of those people who did that. He wrote a lovely memoir, only mentioned himself in the memoir, and nobody else was there, just Free Gift. But Free Gift manumitted Thomas McFarland in June of 1819. As we get closer to emancipation, some intrepid women, men, ran away. Susan ran away from Lambert Lawyer in April of 1823, and he only wanted 6 cents for her reward. Manumission records are very rare in Schoharie County. This manumission record I found in the property records in the town, and they record Johannes Enders and his wife in August of 1823, manumitting Eliza Mann, Christina Swart, Hezekiah Manning, Marion Preston, and Jacob Meninkus. And they would have been owned by them, or they wouldn't have manumitted them. Additional insight into how people were treated over time. This is an 1847 bill for Henry Mann, will for Henry Mann, and he, I also will order and direct that my faithful and trusty colored servants Tom and Sarah, his wife, be both supported and maintained by my son George as long as they shall choose to live with him no longer. Pat and I believe that Sarah was an enslaved child given to Henry Mann's wife as a wedding present. In 1847, they are still living with the Manns. Doesn't say anything about wages, just says supported and maintained. The population of blacks in the county remained consistent through the Civil War period. And if we look at, we'll get to that later. So 1790, we have roughly 160, 1800, 1810, we have 551. Many of these are still enslaved. 1820, many of them are still enslaved. 1830, they should all be free. Not all of them are free. I still have, I have found records where they are listed as slaves. By the 1850 census, all of them are named in the 1850 census. And the 1860, we've got 526. This is a very level number of individuals. But if you look at the white population, we have a steadily increasing white population. Pat and I have had a lot of uncomfortable discussions about this. And basically what she and I feel is that this population was kept at a certain level and kept from the opportunities that would allow them to thrive, to grow, to be productive, to enlarge their population. They were kind of, I feel, kept as a labor force. And that's very repressive. It's incredibly repressive. There also was very little opportunity for education for blacks until about the 1840s when they started a school of their own. This is an interesting picture. Nope, that's not it. This one. Dan and I believe that this is taken out in front of the Parrot House. Each one of these guys has a number, and somewhere there is a corresponding ledger that gives you the names of these people. But you see this gentleman here has no number. He's just there. Occupations of men in the 1850 and 1860 Schoharie County U.S. Federal Census. We have 100 laborers. Left blank 53. Left blank 110. There are no skilled laborers. There probably were skilled laborers, but they are not designated as skilled laborers. We know that there were brickworks in the area. We know that the quarry was still active in the area. We know that there were people who tended horses and repaired wagons and did all kinds of stuff, but they are not listed as skilled labor. As it became more and more clear that black people, at least in New York State, would be freed, whites began to think about just what that meant. And New York State had very, very restrictive voting qualifications from the very beginning of statehood. And there were requirements of property owners to be qualified, as property owners to be qualified to vote. Only males who owned a certain value of property were allowed to vote, and this applied to both white men and free black men. The requirements were so high that in 1790 in New York City, of the 13,330 male residents, both white and black, only 1,303 held enough property to be eligible to vote. Beginning in 1830, a series of conventions called by free people of color were convened, starting in Philadelphia, then in New York City, and spreading out over the Northeast as far west as Ohio. And in 1840, the New York State Convention of Colored Citizens took place in Albany on May 29th. The chairman of the convention was a man named Reverend Charles Bennett Ray, and Ken, I think you mentioned him in one of your lectures on the Underground Railroad recently. We don't know if he was related in any way. I can't find a connection to the Ray family of Schoharie, but I'm fairly sure that they probably had some contact. Other prominent African Americans, that's just a generic picture. In the upstate abolitionist movement included Henry Highland Garnett, Stephen Myers, Thomas James, Dr. Thomas Elkins, Harriet Tubman, the Reverend J.W. Logan, and Frederick Douglass. And it is known that each of these engaged in lecture tours throughout the Northeast, raising money for the various organizations they espoused. They spread information and facilitated those in attendance in making political connections outside their hometowns. Henry Highland Garnett began his ministry in 1842 at the Liberty Street Presbyterian Church in Troy, New York. It was in this church that Garrett Smith announced his plan for giving grants of land to black men to assist them in meeting the property requirements for voting rights. At the 1855 National Colored Convention held in Troy, New York, the committee of lecturers reported the names of people assigned to specific counties. Their tasks were to educate, enlighten, and recruit black folk for the various efforts to improve black lives. Included was Reverend J.W. Logan, who was assigned to Schoharie County. Although the involvement of the county's black population in the movement for full suffrage and nationwide emancipation is only hinted at in the documents that survive, there are clues that the participation was there. There were concerted efforts by state organizations to include the black populations of each county, and so therefore they assigned abolitionist lecturers to each county, and the county's black population must certainly have attended some of these lectures, either locally or in nearby counties. There were black newspapers that extensively covered the important topics of rights and abolition, such as the Northern Star, the Freeman's, this is also another Stocks photo. Freeman's Advocate, the Toscan of Liberty, all published in nearby Albany, New York, and Rochester also boasted 2 black newspapers that likely made their way to the county. A short article in the Emancipator, the official newspaper of the American Anti-Slavery Society, appeared in September 19, 1839, and mentioned a man referred to only by the initials PM, who appears at the offices looking for copies of the article American Slavery as It Is for distribution in Schoharie County. The race of the gentleman is not mentioned, but certainly abolitionist material was available in Schoharie. Garrett Smith. You don't know about Garrett Smith. Garrett Smith was a wealthy white man who inherited extensive land holdings, probably over 150,000 acres in the Adirondacks, and he donated much of his personal fortune to help freed slaves. Smith gave away about 120,000 acres of land in the Adirondacks to African American men in 1846 and 1847. Besides being a fervent abolitionist, he was also an advocate of equal rights for blacks. He conceived and executed a plan to give away plots of land from holdings to deserving black men. The plan had multiple goals, including providing an avenue for newly emancipated men to support themselves and to launch them on their way to meeting the repressive property requirements for blacks. Plots of roughly 40 acres were distributed to 3,000 men, among them more than 30 from Schoharie County. Somewhere, nope. That list is also in the handout. In Jack Daniels' book, Discovering the Forgotten History of African Americans in Schoharie County, Jack describes and speculates on a document that he came across. This document is now in the possession of Jerry Wright. Pat and I have seen it. It's bigger than we thought it was. It's advertising a meeting of the Sable Sons of Africa, and it will be held at the log cabin of Cornelius Tebow Jr. at the head of Spring Street on Saturday 15th at 2:00 p.m. for the purpose of nominating suitable persons for town offices to be supported at the ensuing election, and to take effective measures for the speedy amelioration of the condition of the black race. I really think that this has to do with getting in touch with the representatives from Garrett Smith, applying for and being granted land in the Adirondacks, and apparently the turnout was pretty big because it appeared not to have been well received by the white population, and a satire of the meeting was published in the Schoharie Patriot newspaper, portraying the participants as ignorant buffoons. The list, no, I keep hitting the wrong one. It's a list of those 27 men who were granted land and in either Essex or Hamilton and Franklin counties up in the Adirondacks. This is also in the handout. In the 1850 census, 21 of the 27 men were in Schoharie County, indicating that they did not go to the Adirondacks. The land was granted free and clear. You did not have to go there. You did not have to farm the land. You did not have to build a cabin on it. You were not required to do anything but own it. And Pat and I have done some extensive research along with Amy Godine, who wrote Black Woods, which is all about the Timbuktu land grants in Essex and Franklin counties, I think it is. And we can't find deeds of record for any of this. I don't know where it is. Maybe Peterborough is the next place we have to go, but the only condition, my only restriction, this is Garrett Smith, my only restriction upon you in making out this list is, first, that upon it there be the name of no person younger than 21 and no person older than 60. Second, that there be upon the name of no person who is in easy circumstances as to property and no person who is already the owner of land. Third, that there be upon names of no drunkard, and I had almost added of no person who drinks intoxicating liquor, since to drink it, though ever so moderately, is to be in the way of drunkenness. He was a real temperance guy. I keep going backwards. Here we go. In 1859, there was an indenture filed in the county office building regarding the formation of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, as this community attempted to find their place in the greater economic, social, and political climate of the county. They established a spiritual home as well. After the establishment of the AME Zion Church, the recording of births and marriages of by people of color dropped off significantly in the two established churches, the Dutch Reformed Church and the St. Paul's Lutheran churches in town, in the area, indicating greater regard by the Black community for themselves as a unique and worthy population, independent of the white community. The loss of these records makes me cry. Leaves a gap from 1859 to 1935, when this church closed. The majority of African Americans recorded their significant life events in this AME church, and the very thin thread of family history disappears with those records. We know that there was a black school on Spring Street around 1840 in or near Mrs. Tebow's house. And this is the indenture that was filed in 1859. And I believe that the list of trustees are also in the handout. In 1862, Black men were finally allowed to serve in the military, partly because of the pressure of white casualties and the need for more soldiers. After the law was changed and blacks were being recruited, the black activists continued to pressure for full rights and equal pay if they were to participate in the war. They were pivotal in the eventual granting of full suffrage and other significant gains in the black equality. Black recruitment was boosted after a slow start by leaders such as Frederick Douglass, who felt participation was essential to prove black worth and to gain full citizenship as a nation. Over 180,000 black men eventually signed up and fought in the war. Over 40,000 of these men died in the war, either from disease or in battle. This is the list from the 20th Regiment U.S. Cavalry Infantry, and who did I find today down in the,
Zant. Name Zant.
Jeremiah Zant is buried in the colored cemetery in Middleburg. Where am I pointing this? In the 26th, was it in the 26th? I think it was in the 20th. This is another list. Harry Tebow. Tebow is a family that I followed for well over 100 years in this county. And the 11th U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery.
I believe Adam Larkin is buried here.
Adam Larkin is buried in the Old Stone Fort.
I think so.
Okay, part of this we haven't gotten to yet. There's a lot of stuff that we had to wade through. But these guys are all listed in the handout. 29, 30, 31. So this is something that you have to know something about census records. They're not really accurate. So what I did is, just to give myself an idea of when the population here dispersed, 1865 New York State Census, we have 401. This is all according to Google research. 1870, we have 98. I'm not sure that that's accurate. 1875, we have 162. 1880 census, we have 463. I'm not sure that's accurate either. In 1900, we have 121. In 1910, 113. In 1920, we have 14. And in 1830, we have 20.
Is this
So-
heads of household or family grouping?
That's blacks,
Total.
Okay.
children, adults, whoever. In the 2020 U.S. Census, we have 277 people who claim to be of African American descent in the county. I couldn't tell you how many there are now. And so, and you'll recognize this gentleman, I'm sure. This is Caesar, one of the last slaves. This is from Jack Daniels' book. An old photo in the Schaefer family who lived at the Rocks for 10 generations. In doing this, we have come across some really interesting people that I would like to know lots and lots more of. Caesar is one of them. We have a Caesar early in the records with numerous ladies and numerous children. And what happens is, after emancipation, you have no last name. You have a choice to take the name of the person who owned you. You have a person who you like, who lived next door. You have something that you've made up in your head and want to call yourself. A lot of people chose the last name Freeman, so we have lots of Freemans in the black population. But Caesar becomes a last name. And we have one of Pat and my favorite people is Betsy Caesar. We find her in the 1850 census. She's 105 years old. She was born in Africa. She was likely born around 1745, and likely made the Middle Passage, probably as a child. Quegwo Naxam. What a great name, but no information. Martinez Phoenix also had a large family. There were a lot of Phoenixes at one time, and then they just disappeared. Cuff. Cuff is an Ivory Coast word indicating a day of the week, and it could indicate African origins. By the 1850 census, Cuff becomes a last name. Cuff is buried in the Lutheran cemetery behind the Presbyterian Church at the top of the hill in section 7. No dates are recorded, only the word Cuff. And Joseph Prince, or Joseph Pry, who could be the same person, he was a servant to Colonel Jasper Ward in Captain Frederick Muzzey's organization in 1814, indicating that he served as a servant in the War of 1812. Lots of pretty interesting people that we have known nothing about. Thank you. I didn't take 2 hours like I would. Oh, you had a question?
Yes, I because my family had slaves. There was a Bartholomew, and also they married a Broman. And I was, on the census, I found that they had 1 slave.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told by one of the historians that, usually if you see just 1 slave, it's a household slave. Is that commonly true, or?
Commonly true, yes. They did domestic work, they did laundry, they were a cook, they were nannies, they were, whatever. When you find probably the largest number of 4 or 5, the Romans owned quite a few of them, and I think that they owned them individually, but used them collectively as farm labor. There were a number of, because we don't have records. We don't have farm records. We don't have, any of those, like a daily diary from any of these people. There may have been at one time. They may be with the family still. We don't know where these records are. But yes, if there was one, and to be very honest with you, to own a slave was a prestigious thing. And so if you could own a slave, and very often enslaved people, even through emancipation, stayed with the family that they had been enslaved by because they had no place else to go. And so they stayed unto old age. One of the issues that I have is that we don't know where any of these people are really buried. I have been told that there is a burial in the Schaefer farm, the Rocks, that there are some in the Lutheran cemetery in Schoharie. There's the colored cemetery in Middleburg. There may have been family burials where these people were interred with the family, but we don't have those records, or their records are not clear enough for us to know exactly what happened to them.
I know he was in 3 wars, so would it be a possibility that also he went with him with the different wars?
As a servant?
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I mentioned Prime or Prince, because he was listed as a servant to Muzzy. Usually a servant indicated that this person was enslaved. Yeah?
Do you have any indication of why in the early 20th century the population declined so much relative that was demonstrated in the census records?
Several reasons. First of all, they had very little opportunity here. Second of all, they had the opportunity to move into a a more metropolitan area where there was a larger black population where they could assimilate into that population. We know a number of them went to Schenectady, Amsterdam, down on the Hudson River back to Poughkeepsie. I followed one of the Tebows out to Richfield Springs, where he wound up being the only black person in the town of Richfield Springs. But I also spoke to people out there who described his family as Portuguese. So, you know, I mean, it's how you fit in. He, Solomon Tebow in the 1930s owned a auto garage. Maybe he's living out there in Richfield Springs like that. But they went where there was an opportunity for them to expand beyond the opportunities that were here, which was pretty much none. Pat?
I wanted to make before we ended up, I wanted to make a quick correction on the introduction in that we're not the only people who have been doing research on the black community. You know, Ken Jones is here and he's certainly done quite a bit of research.
He just sent me something today. I haven't even looked
Yeah,
at it
so
yet.
we want to acknowledge that and thanks for.
I hope I said two of the few, because I do know Ken. Ken has given a lecture here,
Yes.
so.
And there are people who are looking into it because the awareness is growing that this was a population. It's not just Schoharie County. Greene County, Ulster County, Albany County had quite a large black population. Schenectady County, Montgomery County, Kelly Farquhar wrote a book. I can't think of the name of that book, but she's the archivist up at the Fonda Records and Archives Library in Fonda, New York, and probably 4 or 5 years ago published a book on African Americans in Montgomery County. So they existed here in fair numbers. Maybe not as many as we had in Schoharie because they were used predominantly for farm labor. But they did exist, and there is not a lot of records about them. When I was a genealogist here, there was a woman from Hurley, New York, who contacted me several times about a group that down in, I guess it's Greene County, that they referred to as the Eagle Nesters. And it was a mixed race community, high on a hill somewhere, and it was indigenous blacks and whites in a community together. And was wondering if we had anything similar here, which we kind of did. So, yeah.
Are there records from Lansing Manor? Because they certainly must have had a lot.
They must have had slaves, yeah. I don't know. Had we?
I tried a couple times and I haven't gotten very far.
Okay.
Yeah, cause.
Yeah.
Good question. Where is the rocks? And
If you drive towards Middleburg from here, you'll see a sign for the rocks right on, on the right hand side of the road. It's just as you're leaving Schoharie.
it's what'd you say?
It's on the right hand side of the road, headed to Middleburg from here.
Right.
And there's a sign that says the rocks, and it's just as you're leaving Schoharie.
Oh, okay.
Or like maybe just after the Schoharie
Going
line.
up the hill, like just before Jack Miller's.
Yep.
As you're coming up the hill, it's right on the right.
And there's a whole bunch of rocks. It's like a rock ledge on the
Yeah.
side of the
House
road.
is not visible really.
The house is on the other side of the road, but the rock ledge is on the, you go into Middleburg, it's on the left-hand side of the road.
And the second was about the records that were lost from the AME Zion Church. Does the central structure of the AME Zion Church know anything about where the records might have happened to them?
No, I've contacted them in Louisville. several times. They have no records that they know of. And I have contacted, local AME churches, and they don't have any records either, so,
It's the lost industry.
it went home with somebody,
Right.
you know?
Somebody's attic.
They're in somebody's attic somewhere, or basement, or
I think we're lucky.
got tossed out when grandma died, you know.
Get thrown away.
These things happen, these things happen. Unfortunately, this is a big loss for the people that we hear. Ken?
There were black cemeteries too that were isolated unto themselves where the black population was found, like near Duncan Bellinger's farm, there was a black cemetery, and there was one where the railroad went through behind the apple barrel down towards the creek when the, that's what Marty Folan told me, her brother told her there was one cemetery down that way, close to where the Schoharie Valley Railroad tracks, I guess, went through.
But had they ever been surveyed, or?
No.
Yeah. It was interesting this morning at the Middleburg Colored Cemetery up behind where the Middleburg Cemetery is. They had brought in magnometers, LiDAR, whatever, and gone through. There's maybe 4 headstones in that cemetery. There are 39 people buried there. Known only to God. Yeah.
We also went to that cemetery, you went with me one time when I played a funeral Sunnyside, and they said on the other side of those trees, yeah, on the other side of those trees was the black cemetery, but there wasn't anything there.
Right, and it's called the Sodom Cemetery.
Yeah.
And I looked, we have cemetery records, rural cemetery records in Schoharie, and I looked it's listed in the cemetery records, but there's no indication of what color these people may have been, so, or if there is even a stone. Usually when you do that kind of a survey, you wind up with, what's written on headstones. And not all that information doesn't give you all the information you want. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you.